Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head back up to Gothenburg, or Göteborg you should say in Swedish, and we're going to return to a brewery who you've seen me review a number of things from now actually, and they always throw out some interesting stuff, but for this one, for the first time we're actually going to go to the darker end of the spectrum, although I have reviewed a Scotch ale from these guys before, but this is the first kind of stout type beer that I'm reviewing from them, although it's a brewery, you know, that are pretty well known. So for this one we are going to go back to Stigbergets Bryggeri once again, and we're having a taste of their Trouble Sleep. This guy is an Imperial Stout coming in at 12% ABV, and it's brewed with coffee from the coffee roastery of Per Nordby, which is one of the little local coffee roasteries that you're going to find up in Gothenburg. And it's kind of interesting, this one, because as I've told you many a time, Stigbergets Bryggeri, who are one of the other very well known craft beer breweries up in Gothenburg, they've produced some of the best coffee stouts that I think you'll find with Hunter and Sons from Bristol over in England. So I'm very, very curious to see what Stigbergets can offer in this regard, because I think this is a style that Sweden is pretty good at. The Imperial Stout is one that they're pretty good at, and I think, you know, there's a couple of good producers of coffee stouts up here that are definitely worth checking out. So yeah, looking forward to this one, and as always I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Stigbergets. I've reviewed a number of their beers before, and I'm sure I'll review more in the near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beers based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Stigbergets Bryggeri then, on to my brewery notes. So Stigbergets Bryggeri, as I've told you before, are based in Gothenburg, and they were founded by Nils Hultkrantz and Richard Simonsson, and the pair own two bars that share the one kitchen. This is Barkino and the Hagabjörns Cafe, which are located on Linnegatan in the city, and both of these opened back in 2007, so a little over 10 years old now actually. But originally the idea was to brew a few beers that they could sell in the bars, and this led to them kegging it and actually selling the beer to other pubs, and eventually bottling the beer in November of 2014. So the original beers were mainly English and German styles, but more recently they were expanding into the American hoppy styles of beers, which is of course how they really made their name. But they started out with a 1,000 litre brew kit from Slovakia, but they soon upgraded to a 2,000 litre JTM system from Denmark in 2015. And in their original brewery they did have the capacity to double this, and I believe they did do that. But Niels and Richard are joined at the brewery by two brewers and another three people really who deal with logistics and packaging and various other things. Their original head brewer was Ole Andersson, who is very, very well renowned actually, and he's the co-owner of OO Brewing, but he's since been replaced by Barnaby Struve, who was one of the vice presidents over at Three Floyds in Munster in Indiana in America. And from what I understand, Ole Andersson has now gone on to focus pretty much solely on operations over at OO Brewing. But they've recently opened up a new brewery at Partihalana, which is where they brew 5,000 litres at a time, and they're also beginning to work on some sour beers as well. So I think there's some very interesting things to come from Stigbergets in the future. But they've also started selling their beers in 440ml cans, the kind of tall boy type things, and they're exporting a lot more these days as well. But they've now got a brew team of Ollie Banks, who used to work for Beavertown in London in England, and also Lucas Monroyd, who used to work for All In Brewing Company, one of the quite well known gypsy breweries in the Gothenburg area as well. So yeah, it's been interesting times for these guys. In recent times their beer has kind of gone up and down a little bit, and but as I say, very, very excited to see how this one turns out, because there are some very good coffee stout producers in the Gothenburg area. I think the darkest beer I've had from these guys before was actually a Scotch ale, which I think turned out really quite nicely, to be honest. So very, very curious to see how these guys do the dark end of the spectrum. As I always say with a brewery, if you want to get a measure of how good a craft brewery is, you want something from the light side of things like a pale ale, an IPA or something like that, and you want something from the very heavily malty side, such as an Imperial Stout. I think that's always a good measure of a craft brewery. But very curious to see, as I said, what Stigbergets can throw up in this one. So yeah, that's all you really need to know about the brewery for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more, check out the brewery website in the description below, and as always you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram and all the different things like that. So yeah, let's get on to the tasting of this beer itself. As I told you at the start of the video, this one is a 12% Imperial Stout, and it's brewed with coffee from Per Nordby, who is one of the local coffee roasters in the Gothenburg area. So yeah, this one's quite an interesting little can actually. I've tried one or two beers from Stigbergets in these little kind of almost Red Bull shaped cans. This is a 330ml can, of course, but yeah, another really interesting piece of artwork on this one. It's got this kind of almost Illuminati kind of Christian cross thing on the back, which I think is very cool. Peter, of course, over at the Clueless Drinker is a lot more versed when it comes to art and things like that. He really enjoys talking about the art on craft beer from what I've seen of his videos. But yeah, very, very nice, the artwork on this one, and I do like that kind of Illuminati Christian cross type thing on this one. But there you can see, here is the little symbol for the Per Nordby coffee roastery on there. And I'll try and put their, I'll try and remember and put their website link in the description below. And there is the Stigbergets symbol, which you'll see on pretty much all of these beers. But yeah, 330ml can, this one of the slightly taller ones. But let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I guess one thing that I should also say about this beer, I believe this one was released in very, very early January of 2019 here in Sweden through Systembolaget, and this can is absolutely full. It's absolutely just right full to the brim. So we'll get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I've actually got a tiny little cut on my thumb as I'm filming this review for you, and the beer, just a little bit of the beer has gone in, and you can feel the alcohol stinging away at this little cut actually, which is quite funny. That kind of shows how boozy this beer actually is. But as you can see with this one, it's poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour, which is exactly what you would expect from an Imperial Stout. And when you open this one up, you get some lovely big dark chocolatey notes on this one. Very, very high cocoa, you know, 80–90%, but you also get some lovely coffee smoothness out of this one. But in terms of its appearance, you know what, lovely black ebony rosewood colour. You could see there was a very, very thin, I would say it was a kind of dark fawn beigey coloured head on this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, and a few little ones just going up towards the bottom of that head there. But you know, overall it looks pretty nice. The head's just completely faded away on this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, but nothing overly surprising about this one in terms of its appearance when you consider that it's an Imperial Stout, exactly kind of as you would expect from this one. Although maybe with some of them you would get a more kind of long lasting head, but I found that the higher the alcohol content in these beers, the you know, the smaller the head and the less lasting the head does tend to be. So not overly surprised that the head has gone a little bit from this one. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. So yeah, so with this beer, this is very interesting. The coffee in this one to me comes across as being very earthy. It's definitely got a nice little bit of smoothness to it, but it comes across as quite a well-fired, earthy kind of coffee, to be honest with you. And I would say that, you know, I'm no expert in coffee. I actually very, very rare, I pretty much never drink coffee. I'm just not used to caffeine these days, but I love the coffee Imperial Stouts, and it's largely thanks to Stigbergets Bryggeri that I've really been getting into this style recently. But yeah, the coffee in this one strikes me as being very earthy. It does have a little hint of an aromaticity to it, not much in the way of citrusy kind of quality, but mainly a nice roasted earthiness to it, and just a little bit of a slightly sort of floral aromatic kind of thing. I always find this very interesting with this beer style, just how much and how much complexity these coffee beans can actually add to the beer. And obviously Stigbergets, we know, are a very, very capable brewery actually, but very first time I'm trying one of their darker beers, right enough. So yeah, well, the coffee really adds a lot of different layers to this one. There's definitely a little bit of a kind of red fruity ester coming out of this beer. I would say it's got some of that sort of figgy, kind of pruny juiciness to it, to be honest, but at the same time you get a little bit of an almost medicinal, slightly phenol quality to it. It's almost got a little bit of a cakey aroma as well, which is quite interesting. But underneath that, a little bit of brown sugar in there, not too much, kind of like a well-fired brown sugar, and some nice, very, very dark chocolate, quite a high percentage cocoa chocolate out of this particular beer, I would say. Good little bit of earthiness from the hops in there as well. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of English hop used in there, but then I guess you might have some of the American ones like Summit, or you know, maybe a little bit of Williamette or something like that as well. But yeah, even the red fruits have a little touch of sharpness to them. But the way the earthiness comes out as well with this beer, you know, it's got a bit of that slightly darker earthiness, which makes me think English hops, whereas the you know, the American ones just have a little bit of that kind of smoother earthiness, and the German hops, of course, have a little bit of a sweeter earthiness there. But the German hops I don't think are relevant for this one. But overall, this beer, I would say, actually, in terms of a coffee stout, it leans towards the sweeter side of the things. The more used to the aroma your nose gets with this one, I think the slightly sweeter it's going to get as well. But it smells like an absolute monster of a beer, so I really can't wait to actually have a taste of this one. So let's not leave it anymore. Let's have a go at this one then. So this one is the Trouble Sleep, a 12% Imperial Coffee Stout brewed with coffee from the Pern Nordby coffee roastery in Gothenburg, brewed by Stigbergets Bryggeri from Party Halarna area in Gothenburg up in the city. This must be review number 8 or 9 I've done from these guys, but yeah, this is one that I've really been looking forward to. So let's get stuck into this beer then. Slange, skål. Ooh. Now that's interesting. This is interesting in the fact that I'm finding it starts off quite sweet, and the further into the aftertaste you go, on this first sip, the darker, more roasted and more earthy this beer's becoming. So yeah, first impression is that this one's quite sweet in the beginning, but then it starts to become a little bit more kind of punchy in the aftertaste. I think that's the first impression I'm having of this one, but I'll say straight away, I do like this. This is a solid beer, this one, but it's almost a little bit drier than some of the Imperial coffee stouts I've had before as well. But yeah, I definitely like what they've pulled off with this one. This is again, as I say, this is a style that I've been getting more and more into recently. But this is a very, very solid example of a coffee stout. If you like your stouts to be a little bit more roasty and toasty, then I think this is one you're going to enjoy. And if you do like your coffee stouts to be a little bit more kind of punchy in terms of that coffee flavour, then this is one that I think you're going to enjoy as well. The coffee in this one is really dark, well fired and roasty and earthy. That's the impression I'm having of this beer, but you can even pick that out in the aroma. I would say the coffee side of this beer is pretty much exactly what you would expect when you take in the aroma a little bit. But yeah, I'll give a thumbs up to Stigbergets for this. But this is a beer that it certainly takes you a little bit of time to kind of appreciate. So when you take this one in, make sure you sugar it around your palate and just let your whole mouth adjust to it before you start analysing it too much. But yeah, coffee in this one is just very, very nice. Let's take the hoppy side of the beer first then. Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice dark earthiness in there. I'd say from the flavour of this one, I'd suspect there's more American hops in this one. I think there might be a little touch of English hop in there. I don't think Fuggles, it doesn't have, in fact, well, there could be a little bit of Fuggles in there just because of the way. The Fuggles hop from England, of course, has that little bit of almost ashy quality to it, and you can pick up a little bit of that in there, but there's a very, very strong earthiness to this one, which is making me wonder if it's like Summit or something like this that's in this beer. But when you move forward from that earthiness, there's a good bit of IBU coming out of that bitterness in there as well. But as you come further forward, it just smooths out a little bit, And the earthiness travels quite far forward along the sides of your palate actually. There's a little touch of a kind of floral note to this one, and around the very front curve of the palate you've just got a bit of a lighter sort of grassiness to this beer as well. But the grassiness, I'd say it's quite dark. Some of the earthiness is even reaching the kind of front tips of your tongue too. The earthiness in this beer is very, very strong, but that's mainly from the hops on the edge of your tongue, right enough. The middle of your palate, of course, you can feel that there's a little bit of a smoothness kind of underpinning this beer. There's a sort of roasty black malt backbone to this one. But on top of that though, you can get some of this slightly thicker chocolatey note to it, and again I would say this is a very high cocoa chocolate. You're talking that 80–90% kind of cocoa type thing to this one. But as I was saying earlier, in the centre of your palate, this beer starts off very, very nicely. It starts off quite sweetly actually, to be honest with you. That chocolatey note is very sweet in the beginning. It's almost like a syrupy chocolate, then it just evolves to be almost like a slightly charred high cocoa chocolate as well. There is an element of brown sugar in here, and it is the sweetness that you're getting out of this one has an element of that treacly, molasses, syrupy type brown sugar to it as well. You can feel that right in the centre of your palate, but gradually over time your palate is drying out and leaning a little bit more towards that roasty black malt side of things, and the coffee is just kind of infused into that a little bit. It is the coffee and the black malts in this one are mixing together in a very, very interesting way, and this coffee stout is definitely a little bit drier and less smooth in comparison to some of the ones that I've had from Stigbergets Bryggeri, for example. But the coffee flavours in this are definitely very, very earthy and very roasted, but at the same time you can detect that there is a little bit of a kind of aromatic nature to this one. So I think if you took the coffee out of the equation for this one, I think this would be quite a smooth and slightly sweet imperial stout. But when you put the coffee notes into this one, it becomes a very dark. Becomes quite a dark, roasty note, roasty imperial stout. But yeah, it's a lovely, lovely beer. This one, it's one that certainly will test your palate. So if that's what you want, certainly do have a go with this one. It wasn't too expensive either, I don't think. I'm sure I only paid around 50 crowns for this beer. So in term, 12% imperial stout in a 330, that's pretty damn good value wise actually. And if you like the coffee stout style, this is one that I think you're going to enjoy. Just be aware that it leans more towards that roasty, toasty side of things, even within that coffee stout category. This one's definitely a little bit more well-fired and toasty and roasty compared to some of the other ones that I've had, but a beautiful, beautiful beer nonetheless. It starts off quite sweet, it becomes a little bit darker and bitter and roasty in the middle, and then it just starts to smooth out and relax a little bit the further into the aftertaste you go. But the Stigbergets get a big kind of thumbs up on this one for me. They've done a great job of this, and it's cool to finally try an imperial stout, or even just a stout, a darker beer from these guys, because they did a very good job of the Scotch ale, but again, that's at the sweeter end of the spectrum than this beer by quite some distance. But the coffee flavours in this beer are definitely coming out in the middle of your palate, and they do become a little bit more prominent, and they just smooth out a little bit the further into the aftertaste you go. But as I said, the coffee vibe from this one is definitely a bit earthy, a little bit toasty, and it has a little bit of a kind of aromaticity note to it as well. So just bear that in mind when you try this one. If you like a nice dark, earthy, but slightly floral coffee, this is one that I think you are going to enjoy. I think the imperial stout side of this one, it would actually be a slightly sweeter imperial stout, but fairly balanced I would think. But the coffee just gives it a very, very interesting complexity, and I guess this is one of the things that really makes the coffee stout such an interesting style of beer. So just bear that in mind when you try this one. I would really recommend you have a go at this one for yourself and just see what you think. But for me, a lovely, lovely beer, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. This is a style I've been getting more and more into recently, and I'd be curious to see how if Stigbergets can make a partnership with this little coffee roastery, the Per Nordby roastery, in the same way that Hunter and Sons did with Stigbergets Bryggeri. That could be a very, very interesting thing going forward. In terms of the mouthfeel of this beer then, definitely a full-bodied beer. Carbonation is very smooth. It does have a good oily character, this one. In terms of IBUs, I would say this beer, particularly in the aftertaste, is pushing around the sort of 50-60 kind of note in this one. There's a bit of sweetness to this one in the beginning. Gradually the beer becomes more roasty and toasty. Nice bit of bitterness from the hops, but also complemented with a bit of bitterness from the malt base in there as well. A little bit of sweetness from the malts, but gradually it becomes drier and more roasty and toasty. There is an element of a fruity quality to this one. We never actually mentioned that much in the tasting section of the video, so we should look at that a bit more closely actually. So as I always say, when you go behind the front curve of your palate, you always get that little oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters start to come out of the beer. And for me, it has a little bit of a... It's got a little bit of a more juicy kind of figgy, pruny note the further into the aftertaste you go, and a little bit more towards the front of the tongue. But in the beginning, it's got a little bit of a kind of plummy sharpness to it. So it comes in a little bit sharp, then it just becomes a little bit more juicy the further into the aftertaste you go. There's a little bit of that juiciness on the edge of your tongue, but really that kind of it's quite an interesting contrast to the more roasty, earthy notes that you're getting from the coffee and from the hops in this one. So it does have a little element of a juicy fruitiness in it, but also a little touch of sharpness as well. But a very, very solid beer, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this one again, or any other imperial stouts that Stigbergets are going to produce. So yeah, if you get the chance to have a go at this one, I do recommend that you have a taste of it for yourself, because it's quite different from the other things you're going to find from Stigbergets. But let's leave it at that for this one. I've got the impression that this review is going on a little bit more. But yeah, a lovely, lovely beer this one, and one that you definitely need to try for yourself. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stigbergets. If you like a nice imperial coffee stout, and one particularly a coffee that's a little bit more earthy and roasty, then this is one that I really think you're going to enjoy. The beer starts off sweet, but then it becomes more of a kind of roasty, toasty, almost earthy kind of thing the further into the taste you go. But a lovely beer, and one that you definitely need to have a go at for yourself. So yeah, until the next time, it's Landed just now, and I will catch you guys very soon. This is the Trouble Sleep, an imperial coffee stout at 12% ABV from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Until the next time, it's Landed just now, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Skål.